Businesses are innovating. Who would have thought? In a post-pandemic era, businesses are innovating. Small businesses, it could be the entire unique sales proposition of them. Big businesses are really struggling to innovate as they always are, like the Titanic. From your side, like we always talk about the Kodaks, the Blockbusters, the Yellow Pages of the world. If you don't innovate, you die. Is this just a great, well done, you're telling me something I don't know, or where does this stem from?
Well, this news story for this week really comes from some experiences and then also things I've seen. And I'm sure you're seeing similar things, Grant. I kid you not, in the last week, I've had a couple of phone calls from business owners who they're kind of in this zone right now where they're a little bit panicked because of what's going on, whether it be from interest rates or rising wage costs or whatever it is. And then on the other side is their reaction to things is to stay the same.
Yep.
They're trying to hold on and almost no, we just got to stay here and we just got to go back. We just got to go back. I got to keep the same and things will be the same. I'm going to double down on what I used to do and everything's going to be fine. And I kind of am, or actually I'm not kind of, I am of the view that that's a terrible mentality. I think it's actually a really dangerous mindset and a really dangerous way to run your business. So you mentioned before Kodak, Blockbuster and the Yellow Pages. It's what do they all have in common?
They didn't innovate and they died.
They resisted the trend, right? So Yellow Pages, they could have dominated online.
Yep.
They probably could have been the best online classified in some way. Then you've got Blockbuster, who had the opportunity to buy Netflix.
Yep.
And just thought, this online thing isn't going to happen. And then you got Kodak, who invented the digital camera and then didn't want to make it a thing because their chemical business was too profitable. So I look at that as those key examples, and even though very different industries, it's ripe, right? How many, I would think of this right now, wonder if you have any of these in your life where it's people that had really successful retail businesses and didn't take them online.
Yes. Yeah. Dude, I know people. They're like, this is what I do. People come in, foot traffic goes past my shop and I just sell these clothes. That's it.
Right. So where I look at this right now is that with what's going on in the world, I think we've actually hit a new time. So I'm going to call it post-pandemic.
Yep.
We'll go with it?
We'll go with post-pandemic.
So what do I mean by that is that the world had this event that's happened for a couple of years. It changed everything. We really had to reshape how we do businesses in a lot of ways. We're coming out of that right now, but we're not going back to what it was like before the pandemic. We're actually going forward into a new way of doing business. And if you are one of these businesses that innovate, and I've got some cool examples of this, by the way, which we'll go into, I think you can do really well, really, really well, generational wealth well, change the lineage of a family well, versus if you're someone who stays stagnant, chances are you're really going to struggle in the next few years. And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think you hit something that's counterintuitive right back at the start, which was we're going through a state of uncertainty at the moment with global markets down and potentially in a recession, et cetera, which means businesses are sort of tightening up. They're battening down the hatches going, how do I sort of cut out my discretionary spend? How do I sort of automate things and do how do I just reduce my expenses by 20, 25%? And we're also sitting there saying, well, you can't just do that and expect to survive. You can't just be in this survival mode. You have to do that, yes, to maintain profitability and make sure you can weather the storm. But you still have to put this innovative hat on, right? You can't just go batten down the hatches, let's stop buying nice meat and just eat sort of other food and just expect to survive and thrive. But that's what people get given. That's what we're growing up on.
It's crazy, right? Yeah. It's crazy. It's and maybe it isn't crazy. Maybe I totally get it. It's we're reactionary to things, and
yes.
The common sense thing is to go, okay, things are not good, I better play defense. But I think that it's a misstep in this environment. And I will say this, right? The world can have a recession. Doesn't mean you have to have a recession.
Yes.
It can be the opposite. And again, just one little story here is that in 2008, McDonald's boomed.
Yep.
Because people stopped going to nice restaurants and they started eating more McDonald's. So McDonald's actually didn't have the downturn that the high-end restaurants have. So just because the environment has changed doesn't mean that you can't be really successful. Yes, you might have to change, but this might be your opportunity to be more successful than ever, while the Kodaks and Blockbusters of the world just can't innovate. Big companies struggle to make these moves where this could be your unfair advantage.
Dude, I completely love it. And it's I'm just going to repeat that because it's the key point is, yes, you're going to be reducing expenses, but you have to increase your innovation. So I've got a list, but I'm going to let you kick off on your list. Go and give us like one of these innovative things that will just make people's minds get fucking blown.
This is my favorite one by far. Because I wanted to prepare some examples for this because it's like, it's easy to sit here, but it's like, how do you actually do it, right? What are people doing? What could I potentially model? And my favorite one when I was looking at companies that have innovated really well recently is John Deere.
Tractors. Dude, I love John Deere tractors.
So do I actually, because my son Jack is a massive fan. I don't know if it's the colouring or whatnot,
green
or the
and yellow
range of toys, a little bit of an innovated there to just breed it in that he should get a John Deere probably as well. But John Deere have been doing this really interesting thing, right? So this is like tractor manufacturing. They make tractors, right? And in recent years, they've actually been like putting a lot of tech on their tractors. So for example, if you buy the brand new with all the gadgets John Deere, it's got things like GPS tracking.
Yep.
So you can actually like automate driving your tractor. And then the other thing is it can actually take measurements of the yields of the crops. So you can know if you're going to have a good yield or a bad yield or a whole bunch of things. But the thing they do that has most impressed me is they've decided that all the tractors they've got, they're going to collect all the data, right? So they've got all these tractors in the world that are working on, in this example, let's say corn farms. So they know how much corn is being yielded.
Yep.
And they sell that data to Wall Street. Because if the Wall Street traders know that, hey, it's been a bad year for corn, right? They're not going to produce as much corn this year. They can trade that on the commodities market. So they're now acting as a data provider to Wall Street.
If you were a farmer, right, going, well, I need to use this. Like I've looked at the John Deere, like they've got this thing called Precision AG and it like maps out the entire farm and it has utility to the farmer of what they are doing, which is why they're going to continue using it. Would you be upset knowing that like now John Deere is going to make a second cut of that information because it directly impacts your industry, potentially negatively, potentially positively?
I'll say maybe, but it's like, how can I put this? Is like, it doesn't really change something for me. Like if the John Deere product is going to get me a better result on my farm and at the end of the day, I'm better off for it and like my economy is better for it, then I'm okay with it.
So I'm curious. Imagine someone's listening to this and they might be a hairdresser. They might have a cafe. They might have a business that it's not so obvious to innovate, right? Like, and I loved the example of like John Deere. Like that is not an obvious innovation of going and selling data to commodity traders. Like
if they can do that, you've got no excuse.
Yeah. Is that like, do they wait for smart people to go to them and say, hey, this is what you could do as an opportunity? Or do they have to like build it internally? Like how would you get them to innovate? Like if you were in anybody's situation, how should they be approaching this just to think differently?
Again, I put some thought into this. I was like, I don't want to be this guy on a podcast getting people excited about like shadow kitchens and John Deere, and then people go, hang on, I don't have a tractor company or a restaurant.
And a hairdressing terms. Like,
all right, so I thought about this a lot. So it's like, well, step one is I think a lot of businesses, if you can reduce costs, obviously you should. Right. And I say obvious costs, right? So if you're currently, I don't know, paying $500 a month for your internet and you can get the same internet service for $100 a month, make that change. That's a good saving. One of the things we've done is we've been using ClickUp more, and I look at it and go, consolidating your SaaS into better tools. Like we saved like $1,000 a month just doing that.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so like I think every business in this time should absolutely be taking advantage of those things. But then step two is in many of our episodes we've talked about like tailwinds. So I really look at it and go, I think it's worth taking a day off, going somewhere different, looking at a list of tailwinds and going, how can my business support these? And just brain dumping and asking your network and mentors the same thing. It's going, okay, well, if, this is one where we've spoken about like the green evolution. So green mining, green innovation. It's like, well, how can my business support these industries? What could I be doing where I could get a piece of that? So you might be a website business who specializes in doing great websites for green companies. Or, there's a whole bunch of things where and I love the mining example because those towns are going to need support. Maybe you're a carpenter and you go, well, if this is where work's going to be, maybe I should be there.
Yep.
Right. So there's so many ways to view that. I think that's so really looking at the tailwinds and where you want to be. For us, I'm looking at this right now and I'm like, well, online media is going to get bigger. That's a tailwind arena for us. I'm going to double down in that area. I'm not going to double down in things that I think are kind of over or have had their day. So, I'm not going to start a newspaper right now. I just think that's a bad idea. And then thirdly, and I think this is a huge one, I don't think in general, like I ask business owners all the time, would you like to be doing more joint ventures and bundles? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, well, how many are you doing? And it's like, none.
None.
I'm like, why not? So I look at this right now and go that joint ventures, I think, is one of the most clever ways to be innovative in times. So it's like, who are the product people you could team up with to create a bundle? What are the services that go with a product or with another service where you could collaborate with someone and do something there? Like, I think it's really creative. Who has the audience that would be perfect for your product, or who has the product that would be perfect for your audience? I think that type of innovation can really like make a massive difference in business as well. So that's how I've been thinking about to kind of approach it in 3 steps. So someone can like innovate and also experience like margin expansion in what they do.
Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into being a full stack business owner, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.